Welcome to Hairless in the Cloud. We are still at Ignite 2023, and we have yet another guest. Jan, who do you brought?
It's Paul Huijbregts, maybe something like that. I'm sorry for that. I'm not originally from the country you are from, the Netherlands. We are the neighbor country, but it's still quite hard for us to pronounce your name. Very, very nice that you are here. You're well known in the community, in the security community. Paul also wrote a book about MDE, a very well-known book, Defender for Endpoint. It's the standard for getting to know Defender for Endpoint. So we are really happy to have you here.
Yeah, that book it's like the best resource ever. It's also the only book, so it's not hard. Yeah, nice to be here. So I'm Paul. I work at Microsoft as a product manager. So I get to work with the engineering team and build all the cool stuff that you see in the product today.
Okay, and you are Seattle-based. You are Redmond-based.
Yep.
Okay.
So I've been with Microsoft for about 7 years. Before that, I was in consultancy, security architect, engineer before that.
Okay.
So I kind of come from the field, definitely techie, always have been. And then within Microsoft, well, it took a little while, but I started out in the Netherlands. And then about 3+ years ago, I moved over here to become a product manager, and so I live nearby.
Okay, so what I didn't understand in the past, or what I still not understand, is how is that departed in Israel and the US? So what is there a distinction? I mean, what is happening in Israel and what is happening in terms of product development? What is happening here?
There are differences. So if you want to know the full history of how that happened, it's in the book. But the short of it is that Israel has always been a cybersecurity R&D center, right? And so Israel culture, a lot of startups, a lot of cybersecurity mentality, everybody's trained to go into the military and be security minded. So that actually grew like tons of innovation, and you may be aware there were tons of acquisitions done in the past there as well. There's an anecdote here. When I walked down the street in near Tel Aviv, forget what the name. Herzliya, thank you. You used to see like multiple buildings with a Microsoft logo and a vague outline of the previous logo, right? And so that tells you a lot about how that happened. It's an entirely new building now. You could say that the early part of the Defender AV cloud was operated out of there initially. And then we started moving into more behavioral monitoring capabilities, and that then evolved into EDR. Whilst the AV cloud piece moved back to Redmond, it originated in Redmond as far as I know. The EDR piece remained in Israel. And so you saw kind of the prevention capabilities primarily being developed in Redmond, and the detection response capabilities primarily in LDC. It's definitely not a very clear cut. We all work on what is called Defender for Endpoint. There's just specific focal points. And more, I would say that these lines are very blurry, despite our efforts to streamline the work and make sure that we're not trying to constantly be on calls with each other, and that kind of makes it a little bit harder for people to preserve a work-life balance. I will say,
time zones.
Yeah, it's a big difference, and the collaboration is intense. We're all working on the same purpose. We're all passionate about delivering the best security value across prevention, detection, response. Some of what you see recently are more fundamental quality usability improvements that you see in the product. You may have heard of the simplified connectivity as an example, right? Or streamlined connectivity, I think is what we called it. Just to make it a lot easier for you to onboard to Defender for Endpoint. And I would say that is currently the biggest area of investment, to have an end-to-end view on everything from hey, I need to go out and deploy MDE to hey, I need to offboard a device and everything in between. Like that whole experience is what we're currently really hyper focused on the Redmond side of things, to even further elevate and make it much easier for everyone to get Defender for Endpoint everywhere.
Okay. So do you think that's a blocker in some projects, that it might not be that easy, or?
In a way, I mean, we have a lot of customers that are extremely successful with our product, and we do recognize that the promises that we deliver on modern Windows, the seamless deployment you have there, that's a very strong promise and one we obviously want to uphold. But if you look at platforms where we're not natively integrated, like older Windows versions or cross-plat versions, that unfortunately we can't boast that same, right? And so that's an area where we're like, hey, we could do better there. We could definitely make it even more seamless. Probably not going to be able to get to the same level, but we can get close.
But we are there, right? We are there at the moment. You have changed the way to onboard servers as well with the update, with the universal agent. So
right, Unified Agent was kind of one step on that journey. We had to. I mean, there's a couple of themes in there, right? It's addressing our Windows legacy, which, being Microsoft, our best security is in our best operating systems. Our best operating systems are the ones that we most recently built. Every time you go, hey, Microsoft, why don't you make your operating system more secure? Guess what? We're constantly doing that, right? And so the very best answer is use the latest and greatest, and then then there's a reality out there, and also the very real. Once you start going to these legacy OSs, you're more and more vulnerable, and there's more and more things that can go wrong, and so the need for a strong cybersecurity solution actually goes up, and that's where customers aren't ready to invest to do upgrades, or there's a lot of red tape around being able to upgrade a workload. And so we acknowledge like legacy is important because we can't just not have coverage, right? And so we need to make sure that that is shored up properly. I think we made great strides with the Unified Agent. At the same time, it's a big, heavy MSI package. It comes with prerequisites, and it takes a little while to actually get it deployed. We also ran into the fact that not only are these legacy machines, very often they're not very up to date. Regardless, right? And so there's a lot of missing patches, and so we come into an environment and we start to deploy, and then we have missing OS updates that we need to deal with. This is a very typical scenario, obviously, but we do want to see how we can make that experience better. And so that's one of the forward-looking things, is we are going to invest in making all of the onboarding experiences much smoother across the entire estate of supported operating systems today. So we're continuing to invest in improving that. We're actually also not ready to drop Windows 7 support quite yet. So that's kind of the reality that I'm dealing with.
But do you really want to run on a not so well patched operating system?
Want to? No. Have to? Probably.
Okay.
Right? And there's only so much I can yell at people to go ahead and upgrade. There are always special cases, always. And if you look at it from just a CISO perspective, they need coverage, right? And even though I would say that the best investment of the cybersecurity budget is in modernization, when reality hits, it hits hard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what we are facing each and every day. 2 weeks ago, we had a big incident at a customer. They have rolled out Defender for Endpoint to all the clients only, not to the servers.
Right.
Guess what happened?
And the clients are relatively up to date because it's easier to cycle and do hardware refreshes and kind of naturally get to at least a somewhat modern state. But
Is this something you're putting in the equation if what you need to support, where you put your efforts? Because from my understanding is, especially these machines that are not patched, that are old, that might also be running on quite weak machines, not a lot of CPU power and stuff like this. I think from a security standpoint, they must be the most vulnerable. So it must be the most obvious part to put something on there to secure them. So but on the other hand, I think I'm doing a little bit of software development, and it's always hard to keep up with all you mentioned dependencies and stuff like this. So the question, this is something you always take into account. Do we do this for Windows 7, or how do you decide when do you cut it? I'm not sure if there's still a version for XP around, because I'm sure there are machines out there.
There is not. No. I mean, there's more to the strategy there. We essentially aim to cover all devices on your network. That's kind of the vision there. How we're going to do that, that's a different question altogether. Like in some cases, we might need to go agentless. In some cases, we will have to build an agent. And then the question is, what's that agent supposed to do? Do we just need observability? Do we need a full-fledged endpoint detection and response stack? Those are the questions that we're actively answering. I think we have a good perspective on what it is that we want to do in that space, more than we do today. And I will say is that from a pure numbers and investment perspective, it's not like, yes, there are many devices probably still out there that are legacy, but they only make up a subset of the entire state. But at the same time, they are the weakest link, right? And so you can't ignore them. It's maybe controversial, coming from a Microsoft employee, but this is just the security reality that we really do need to deal with. I would also say it's a great example, what we released yesterday, the plugin for Windows Subsystem for Linux.
Which is very cool.
Right. And so Subsystem for Linux is a developer-focused tool. Right? It's a feature that's built for developers. And it's intended to give you a great developer experience on Windows if you happen to want to develop against Linux and not against Linux. It takes away a machine. You no longer need a Linux dev machine, or maybe you don't need a Mac anymore. You could work on Windows, which provides very real opportunities for an enterprise to provide a more managed developer workstation, which honestly, like every customer I talk to, developers are always that special group of people where you need some special dispensation. They need to do weird stuff, something that a regular financial user, they don't need to do all of the things that developers do. But the things that developers can do, they're just risky from a security perspective. And so that is where it's very challenging to find that balance between the developer experience and security. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do with something like that. But I will tell you, the amount of developer machines and the number of WSL installations is, of course, far, far less than the total install base of Windows 10. And so when we're developing a feature for that, we're developing it for a very special use case. The numbers don't support the justification. It's really about providing a comprehensive set of capabilities for our customers so they can adopt MDE across the estate and they don't have to seek alternative solutions. So that's a large part of the driving philosophy.
Do you also adapt somehow when in terms of detection possibilities? I mean, does Defender know, for example, what are typical developer workloads or something like that? I mean, can it distinguish between an office user and a developer, for example?
In a way, this is kind of what we consider to be profiling. It's a tricky space, I would say, because it's very hard to determine what behavior is malicious and what's a developer, right?
It's kind of the same.
Sounds good.
Like if you look at it from a machine level, you need way more context and data in order to actually find the patterns there. And so this is an area that is, just a lot of research is involved to get that right, because you stand to get a ton of noise and FPs in that space. And to be frank, that's the hard part. Like, how do you distinguish malware from just badly written code, right? It's very hard to do. How do you distinguish between, I'm trying to install a driver legitimately versus malicious? These are the big questions. This is probably where you'll see the shift to more and more AI-driven experiences, where we could, in fact, build the models that are capable identifying those patterns on the fly. I don't know at this point in time if we're quite there yet, but it's only natural that we would move in that direction.
But wouldn't this also give the attackers an opportunity, if these patterns are somehow well known, to hide in these steps and do something similar to avoid a detection? Isn't it always a risk?
There's only so much an attacker can do to hide their activities. There are always patterns. They will always need to reach out for what are high value assets, right? And so there's definitely stuff we can do, and you saw it in the deception and disruption demos, is where we figure out, oh, there's this pattern of someone that's attempting to move laterally. Initially, it's just a user remotely logging in, but then you see what kind of other activities are they deploying, and then combine that with deception, where we just throw something out there and they pick it up and they're like, oh, great, I can try to use that, and then we catch them.
Like a honeypot.
I think there's a lot of there's a lot of value in that, and I think we need to start thinking more broadly like that. It's like if there's a pattern not on a device, but a pattern across the organization, right? And that's where you start to get more context that is actually actionable. Because what's happening on a device, there's a ton of stuff. It's an operating system, right? But what's happening across multiple devices, guess what? There's less possibilities there. And so that's probably a more feasible target.
And communication then, of course, also communication between those devices. So correlation at the end. So you already talked about the WSL, the Windows Subsystem for Linux. This is something you have actively worked on, right? What are the other topics you are currently engaged in?
Currently, so at the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned that we're looking more and more into these end-to-end experiences. That is where a large part of my attention lies today. I'm also involved in our configuration management capabilities, and this is where there's a couple of key initiatives that we've launched. They're still kind of secret, so I can't give you too much information about it. But essentially, it really comes down to making our management story even more robust, resilience, covering with great reporting experiences behind it, to really up-level that and go above and beyond in our manageability story.
Cool. So this is something that comes from the more administrative part, I would say. The first thing, so Defender for Endpoint is moving some controls, some security controls from Intune, let's say, or not moving, but copying, maybe, I don't know what's the right word, into Defender, so that the Defender portal admin has also the ability to configure security stuff on clients, on servers even. That's basically it.
Yeah, it's a broad set of coverage, and you have to imagine that we have a world-class unified endpoint management solution in the form of Intune, the Intune family. And this covers a wild variety of needs across patching, across software deployment, across configuration. And then there's this little piece of all of that, which is Defender for Endpoint. And so configuring the endpoint security agent it deserves an experience of its own. And this is partly driven by organizational dynamics, where a security team holds responsibility over the endpoint security agent, but not over the rest. But also, there's a very urgent need to make sure that Defender remains well configured and nobody can mess with the configuration. And so it's that intersection of needs that we're really shooting for, and make sure, like, okay, yes, all of the configuration is critical and it's very important for an enterprise, but if we're down for misconfiguration reasons, we're done. Right? We're the last line of defense. That's our job. And so we have a vested interest in making that even more resilient, better, and easier to manage.
So it's to try to centralize this more in your part, and you managed Intune. This is what we are doing on it's more my side. And we've seen it in the past that more and more of these settings are manageable in both areas, or even more on your side. And we're wondering how do you progress? And I think it's obvious, and it's using a Mac. How much control does Microsoft via Intune have on a Mac to configure stuff? And You mentioned Linux and all of these, and you want to add more of these features. And I think inside of Microsoft, a big organization, it is always, hey, we need to control extra settings on Mac. Intune team, hurry up. And I think that's what you're alluding to, that this is not going to happen. So that's why we are seeing a shift to do more and more of this management in the endpoint part.
I wouldn't say no. I think the Intune team have a vested interest in security, and they're pivotal in keeping devices secure, just by keeping them up to date and patching software, and making sure that you do have like a full set of policies across all capabilities of Windows, because there's also stuff that doesn't sit in the Defender suite. So to me, it's really about both. You need to be able to successfully configure all aspects of the device. But I would say it is more, there's a more critical need for our primary audience, which is the security audience, to be in control of that piece for which they are responsible, right? Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a very dry room
I
here.
should have thought about this at the beginning. Always caught me.
Okay, I understand. So, you know, we watched the keynote yesterday, and every second word from Satya Nadella was Copilot. Are you somehow also integrated into this area, or is this not touching you at the moment?
No, I'm not plugged in, and so I think like the first priority of Copilot is to plug into that unified experience that we're offering, right? And that's where it can add immense value, is on top of those portals in assisting security analysts to figure out, hey, what went on, and how can Copilot actually automate away some of the response capabilities there. It's a very promising area. I don't have like visibility on like what are short-term Copilot integrations into kind of the client side of things. I think we'll probably eventually get there, but at the same time, what Copilot does really, really well is just handle a ton of data, right? So how do we get that ton of data? I guess we send it to the cloud, right? So it's the most natural place to put that investment to work.
Yeah, I mean, analyzing stuff, for example, attack surface reduction rules or something like that. If you have the question, can I roll out this attack surface reduction rule or not? What would it have? What impact would it have? And stuff like that. I think these are situations where Copilot could help.
There's a modeling aspect that you're alluding to, where you could indeed take the context of devices and figure out, okay, what makes the most sense to actually increase security without the end user noticing, right? There's different aspects there. It's not the only thing you should be doing. You should. There's a couple of things. Like first, a security organization needs to be in control, right? So, and what that means is that whatever the security organization decides to do on devices, they need to be assured that it's actually going to happen. Like, that's one thing. And then the second part is kind of the gray area, is where, yes, you have kind of this strong guarantee that the base security is in working order. But on top of that, now you have different kinds of scenarios that you cannot predict beforehand, right? And these are developers and users, and they're doing stuff on the machine, and they're using the machine. And that's where inevitably things can go wrong, from a security perspective as well as from our product perspective. So we can false positive, or we can hinder productivity because we're trying to block something malicious, and guess what? It's just Adobe Reader. I mean, and so that is where there is a role for automated intelligence to be able to just dynamically raise the bar when it's safe to do so. I think that's an area where you will see some development in the near future.
Okay, cool. So yourself, you said at the beginning you are coming from the field, you're coming from a consulting company. So do you think in general, when talking about role in security, it is a good thing to start in a normal IT role, to be a broad guy, let's say, versus starting immediately in security and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A deep understanding of infrastructure is like the best piece of knowledge, foundational knowledge you
Yeah.
can have for security. People that don't know how DNS functions
Yeah.
are behind on security.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's maybe an obvious one, but there's so many examples.
Absolutely.
That I can provide.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else you would like to add? Anything you can share regarding?
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for being
You're
here.
welcome.
It was very interesting talking to you. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the Ignite. Was happy to have you here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.